Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Coming to the mandibular second premolar, the mesiodistal diameter of the crown is 7 mm. The numbering system is the universal numbering system. System is for right it is hash 29. It starts from the maxillary right third molar, which is 1 hash 1, goes clockwise to the mandibular left third molar, then comes down to the left mandibular third molar, then comes to the right mandibular third molar. So it is hash 29. The left is hash 20. The Fdi numbering is that the Fdi is a two numbering system or binomial numbering system. These are the quadrants 1, 2, 3, 4. So the right is 4, 5, and the left is 3, 5. And in Palmer notation, it's very easy. For right, the quadrant is like this and fifth tooth from the midline, and for left, quadrant is like this and fifth tooth from the midline. The mandibular, as we have already discussed, the mandibular second premolar has a larger crown as compared to mandibular first premolar. It has also slightly larger and longer roots than the mandibular first premolar. In mandibular premolars, 55% cases have 3 cusp form, buccal cusp and 2 lingual cusp, and the remaining 45% has got 2 cusps, buccal cusp and lingual cusp. The H-shaped group pattern, and one is the continuous U-shaped group pattern. The function of the mandibular second premolar is grinding. It augments the mandibular molars in grinding. The table of specification is that, or developmental table is that, the initiation of calcification is at 2.5 years. The enamel completes at about 6 to 7 years. The eruption is at about 11 to 12 years. And the root completion is at about 13 to 14 years. When you compare it with mandibular, coming to the buccal aspect, when you compare it with mandibular first premolar, this is mandibular first premolar, the buccal cusp tip is less pointed and less sharp. You can say it is blunt or shorter buccal cusp tip. The occlusal cervical dimension is 8.5 in mandibular first premolar, whereas in mandibular second premolar it is 8 mm. The mesio-occlusal slope and the mesio-occlusal slope and the distal-occlusal slopes are not as inclined. You can see here in mandibular first premolar, they are more inclined. In mandibular first premolar, the cusp tip is centered mesio-distally, and the two slopes are approximately equal. There is a less prominent buccal ridge in the center, less prominent buccal ridge, whereas in mandibular first premolar, the buccal ridge is more prominent. More prominent buccal ridge in the mandibular first premolar. In mandibular second premolar, you can see that the lingual cusps are well developed, whereas in the mandibular first premolar, you can see that this lingual cusp is very diminished. The lingual surface of the mandibular second premolar is considerably wider as compared to the lingual surface of the mandibular first premolar, which is narrower. You can see the lingual surface is narrower. The mesial margin is concave from cervical line to contact area and then convex occlusally. Also, the distal margin is concave from the cervical line to contact area and then convex occlusally. The cervical line is evenly convex towards the apex. The occlusal outline, when you compare it with the occlusal outline of the lingual surface of the mandibular first premolar, this occlusal outline is a little higher because the lingual cusps are higher and much less of the occlusal surface is visible from this aspect, whereas in mandibular first premolar, as the lingual cusp is diminished, therefore more of the occlusal surface is visible from the lingual aspect. In the three cusp type, there are two lingual cusp, mesiolingual cusp, distal lingual cusp, and in between there is a lingual groove which is less far extending lingually. The lingual groove is offset towards the distal, as the mesiolingual cusp is larger in size and has occupied considerable more space of the lingual surface as compared to the distal lingual cusp, which is occupying less space and is diminished. Height of contour is in the occlusal third of the crown. Coming to the mesial aspect, the mesial aspect is rhomboidal in form. It is shaped like a rhombus. From the mesial aspect, the mandibular second premolar is less tilted lingually, whereas the mandibular first premolar is more tilted lingually. The buccal cusp tip is not centered over the root. In mandibular second premolar, it is slightly buccal to the center, whereas in mandibular first premolar, the cusp tip is centered. It has a more mandibular second premolar has more prominent lingual cusp, whereas in lingual cusp is very diminished and less prominent in mandibular first premolar. From the mesial cusp or mesial surface, the distal lingual cusp is not visible, as it is very diminished. You can see from the distal surface it is visible, all the three cusps are visible, whereas from the mesial surface only the buccal cusp and the mesiolingual cusp are visible. Occlusocervically, the mesial surface is convex in the occlusal portion and concave in the cervical portion. Contact area is located towards the buccal at the junction of the occlusal and middle third. It is larger in size and circular in outline. The distal surface is similar to the mesial surface, rhomboidal in shape, except that the distal marginal ridge is more cervically located. That's why all the three cusps are visible from this aspect. It has a larger and somewhat wide contact area because it is contacting the mandibular first molar, and it is therefore more wide. Height of contour is in the occlusal third. The cervical line shows less depth of curvature towards the occlusal, whereas in mesial surface the cervical line is more curved towards the occlusal. The marginal ridges of the mandibular premolars are horizontal, both the mesial marginal ridge and the distal marginal ridge. The mesial marginal groove is present in the mandibular second premolar, but this mesiolingual developmental groove may be absent. This mesiolingual developmental groove is absent. Coming to the occlusal table. The occlusal table of mandibular second premolar is nearly square. Whereas the occlusal table of mandibular first premolar is diamond shaped. It is like a diamond or rhomboidal. This is a three cusp type. There are three cusps: the buccal cusp, the mediolingual cusp, distolingual cusp. The buccal cusp has four cusp ridges: buccal cusp ridge, lingual cusp ridge, also called triangular ridge, the mesial cusp ridge, and distal cusp ridge. The mediolingual cusp has also got four cusp ridges: the buccal cusp ridge, the lingual cusp ridge, mesial cusp ridge, and distal cusp ridge. Similarly, the distolingual cusp has also got four cusp ridges: the buccal cusp ridge, the lingual cusp ridge, the medial cusp ridge, and distal cusp ridge. The sloping areas between the two cusp ridges are called inclined planes. There are four functional inclined planes in the buccal cusp. The inclined plane between the buccal cusp ridge and the mesial cusp ridge in mesiobuccal inclined plane. This is the distobuccal inclined plane between the distal cusp ridge and the buccal cusp ridge. This is mesiolingual inclined plane between the medial cusp ridge and the lingual cusp ridge. This is the distolingual inclined plane between the lingual cusp ridge and the distal cusp ridge. In the buccal cusp ridge, all the inclined planes are functional, where in the lingual cusp ridges, only the buccal inclined planes are functional, whereas the lingual inclined planes are non-functional. There are two fossae: the mesial triangular fossa and the distal triangular fossa. The mesial triangular fossa is bounded by the mesial triangular fossa. You can see this is the mesial triangular fossa. It is bounded by the mesial cusp ridge of the buccal cusp, the lingual cusp ridge of the buccal cusp, the mesial marginal ridge, the buccal cusp ridge of the mesiolingual cusp, and mesial cusp ridge of the mesiolingual cusp. The distal triangular fossa is bounded by the distal marginal ridge, the lingual cusp ridge of the buccal cusp, the buccal cusp ridge of the distolingual cusp, and the distal cusp ridge of the buccal cusp. There are three pits in the mesial triangular fossa. There is mesial pit. In the distal triangular fossa, there is distal pit, and in between the central groove and the lingual groove, there is the central pit. The mesial pit is the union of four grooves: the central groove, the mesiobuccal triangular groove, mesiolingual triangular groove, and the mesial marginal groove. The distal pit is the union of four grooves: distobuccal triangular groove, distal marginal groove, distolingual triangular groove, and central groove. The central pit is formed by union of central groove and the lingual groove. It is located lingually where the central groove joins the lingual groove. It has got a single root. The root length is about 14.5 mm. The root is wider buccolingually and narrower mesiodistally. The root tapers to an apex. Here there is tapering. It becomes narrower and tapers. And apex, it is sharp and distally inclined apex. The root, single root, mesiodistally narrower root, buccolingually wider, tapers to an apex which is sharp. This is a bit sharp and distally inclined. So this was all about the mandibular second premolar.